Hello everyone, I loaded up SMITE to grab as many of the 4,000 plus gamer score that I could. One of the achievements required me to master 40 gods, and on my quest to master 40 gods, and after hundreds of hours of playing, especially with some really bad gods that felt more like chores, I found a select few that are very good and very underrated, and that I could recommend to anyone. But don't worry, this will be a guide for not only new players, but also players who are already familiar with the game, but just not with all the gods. And to be honest, I'm actually hesitant to upload this video because I know how toxic the SMITE community can be sometimes. But these are just my opinions, so don't take life too seriously. First on this list, I'm going to be opening up with Neith. So let's just start with the most simplest. Neith is one of the default gods unlocked the second you start the game. One of the very few. She's a very reliable ranged attacker. The only downside is that her health points are practically non-existent, but she can still cause massive damage to any opponent with the right build. She even has an ability that helps her retreat anytime you get in trouble, and when fighting someone who uses this ability a lot, can be quite annoying. And if you are in a party with someone who uses a tank to absorb all the damage, you could pretty much be unstoppable. Now the only reason she's on this list is because not many people use her because she's actually good. They use her because they're new to the game, and don't really know what they're doing, so of course out of the few unlocked gods there are, they choose the one with big badonkadonks. But she's actually pretty good. Most people who use her aren't, at least in my experiences. Here's my current match's final KDA, and this was solely using attack speed items because I was trying to unlock an achievement. Not to mention, I also got 2 pentakill awards. Next up, Hebo. Hebo gives me mixed feelings. He specializes in using his abilities with a very fast cooldown time. This one is special because I hardly see anyone use him. With the right build, your abilities can take no more than a second or less to recharge, as well as dish out massive damage. This god can pretty much be better than Neith, and with a tank, again, you can cause major damage. But I should probably warn you that to use his abilities, you're going to have to get up close and personal, but Hebo is quite the cowardly social distancer, so he is much harder to use, and personally I would go with Neith, but Hebo is not a bad option if you're willing to learn how to use him. Next up, we have Thanatos. Anyone who's played against Thanatos before knows how annoying this god can be. And he's annoying because he's good. Every time I use him, I'm at the top of the leaderboard, regardless if I'm doing good or bad. It's just that good. He specializes in attacking in all ways, physical and his abilities, especially his ultimate, which will pretty much guarantee a kill against any fleeing player. And if it doesn't kill them, it stuns them, letting you kill them with your physical attacks. This is what makes him so annoying to play against. You won't be able to retreat. He also has an ability that boosts his attack speed and movement speed. The rest of his abilities are just always convenient to have and come in handy in pretty much every circumstance. This sounds like an advertisement, but you will not regret using this god if you haven't used him already. The only reason he's on this list is because, for how good he is, I don't see him that much. Next up, Peel. I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it correctly. But anyway, this god specializes in being a very quick attacker, with similar builds as Neith and Thanatos. This god is very good for attacking one-on-one. She comes with an ability that puts an aura around her that deals damage to nearby enemies, which can help you get any kill that's one-on-one. I sometimes even beat gods on a 1v2, and it happens quite often. Not to say that I'm good, because I'm really not that good. She does come with an ability to counter ranged attackers, but it's not the best counter, and if you don't play your cards right, you can get killed pretty easily. This is a more tricky god to play with, but you should definitely give it a try and see if she fits your playstyle. Also, no one ever uses her, so you don't have to worry about someone stealing your god. Next up is Fenr. Maybe some of the younger people who are watching this will recognize this god from Marvel, but don't worry, it's from real mythology. Not that anything from Marvel is original. Fenr is probably the most underrated god on this list. He specializes in attack speed and basic attack damage. His abilities pretty much just buff those already pretty good stats. And with the right builds, this god can pretty much shred anyone in a one-on-one combat, even Peel. And anyone who has played against one can tell you how annoying they are. Fenr is practically Peel and Thanatos put into one. And for how good it is, it should be in every single match. But it's not, and I'm actually a bit relieved that it's not used that much, because it can be quite annoying. His ultimate in arena mode can come in very handy because you can literally pick up enemies and put them in your spawn, where they will get immediately destroyed by the towers. And if I'm not mistaken, it awards you for the kill. And taking a look at my most recent arena match with Fenr, the KDA speaks for itself. And like I said earlier, I'm not really that good. Next up is Medusa. Medusa is a god very similar to Neith. Only difference is that Medusa is a bit beefier. Because Medusa isn't as fragile as Neith, she fits a more aggressive playstyle. The one downside is that Medusa is a bit harder to use, takes a bit more skill than some of the other gods, but if you know how to use her right, she can be very good. And since she's not that commonly used, you won't have to worry about someone taking her before you can choose her. Next up, Scotty. This god is unbelievably good, and I almost never see anyone use her. She's so good that she's one of my mains now. First off, she literally has a companion that always fights for you and follows you around, and it's actually good. All her abilities are actually useful, unlike some other gods in the game, and unlike most other hunters, you don't have to hide behind a tank to be good. Scotty was actually a huge relief to play with after mastering about a dozen gods beforehand that were just awful to play with. Like, it feels so good to no longer be a burden on my team. This god is actually so good, I guess even Scotty doesn't know. I'm sorry. Next up on the list is Chalk. This god used to be very popular, and rightfully so, but for some reason it's not anymore. Back in the day, I would see Chalk in literally almost every single match. It was rare to not see a Chalk in a game, and he was also very annoying to fight. Now, I literally never see anyone use it, and I don't get why. It's not like it was nerfed. It's still just as good. It specializes in attack and defense. His abilities are all pretty useful, especially when used in succession. Even with all your abilities on cooldown, unlike some other gods on this list, you can actually still do a lot of damage with their basic attacks. I highly recommend bringing this god back. But there's not much else to say about this god except that he's good, and that you should use him. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Next up, we have Freyja. Or if you're a Ruby fan like me and got the Battle Pass a while back, then you'd be playing as Vaishni. Even though the ripoff of a Battle Pass was only 2 months long, which isn't enough time to unlock everything on a $15 Battle Pass, but whatever. Freyja is actually a really good god that I never see anyone use. She has abilities that buff her attacks and turn her melee attacks into ranged attacks, which when used together, can be pretty good. Her ultimate is really good for taking out enemies who are retreating, and there is nothing more satisfying than killing an enemy who's running away, which sounds really sinister now that I say that out loud. And while we're on the note of Ruby gods, next up, and last on our list, is Matarasu, or Blake Belladonna. Matarasu is commonly overlooked and seen as basic due to the fact that all of her abilities are pretty standard and generic, but if you're able to get your attack speed and your attack damage up, she can be a pretty nasty attacker. In fact, the first time I used her was when the Ruby Battle Pass came out. Then she quickly became one of my mains. She's very easy to use, that's what she said, and she's very good. If you want a god like Neith, but don't want something that's overly common, use a Matarasu. Definitely a viable option that I rarely see. Anyway, that's a total of 10 underrated gods that I found while trying to master 40. I'm currently at 30 gods. But if I run into any more that I find are underrated, I might make another one. But I think I'll be making a video on gods that I think are overrated, because there are a lot of gods I played with that are very popular, but are very bad. And I don't know why they are playing with them. So you should expect to see that. Anyway, if you enjoyed, like, comment, follow me. Well, if you want. I'm not trying to be pushy. But anyway, I'll see you people later. Goodbye.